Okay, well, welcome back to And So a Tree Still Grows, and the podcast where we dig deep into resiliency, leadership, and the wisdom that fuels our growth. And today I have a guest who's no stranger to perseverance, grit, or even the power of coaching. I want to welcome Quinn. Quinn, why don't you give an intro?
Well, I'm not sure what people actually want to hear. So my name is Quinn Magnuson, and I have the Effort Over Results podcast and coaching service. And I come from, and we'll talk about my background probably in more detail, but basically a very very sports athletic based background. Ultimately, it ended up with me playing in the CFL professionally. I threw shot put and discus for the Canadian track team. So my background is very, you wouldn't expect where I came from to land me there. And then after that, basically what that's resulted in is me having the desire to help others succeed. And that's really where I ended up with coaching today. I don't want to reveal too much because I'm sure you have questions. But what I have recognized, Anette, is that it seems like everything that I've really truly found enjoyment in, contentment and passion in, revolves around helping others, and it revolves around helping others grow and get better. I love being a resource to young people, and I taught for 6 years and coached for 30 in sports. A resource to them to ask questions to get better. I'm a resource now to business owners and entrepreneurs to ask questions and get better. Raising my own children, working with other people in the companies that I've worked for, that I've owned. It always comes back to helping others. And that's what I love to do. And that's what brought me to today.
Yeah, and I love the energy that you bring to any room. We've had the pleasure of being in the same coaching cohort as
Yeah.
we go, and having those conversations with you about leadership and your background coming from a more that traditional authoritarian style of leadership. And leadership isn't just about the hype, it's about the roots that ground us. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about, and redefining leadership and redefining a lot of those values. And I see your tree as this like giant redwood with these
What do you mean? I'm only
stripes
5'6". It's
but with I passion for sports myself, and I think the role in sports in youth and anybody is one where you get to really grow those roots deep of team values and so on. And every root starts with a seed, and every leader has a moment where they realize this is it. This is where my journey begins. So what was your seed moment, and when did you know that leadership coaching or guiding others was something that you had to do?
I keep remembering when I was interviewed for the job that I'm in still. It's been 15 years. And when I was being interviewed for this job in 2010, the people that were interviewing me noticed on my resume that I had roughly 4 to 5 year stints in the previous things that I had done. Even in the CFL, I only spent 4.5 years in the CFL. I came out, got my education degree, became a teacher, taught for 4.5, 5 years, decided to leave teaching, and we can get into detail more later. But then I decided to own my own business because I had an entrepreneurial streak going in me. Owned the business for 5 years. And so when I was interviewed for my current job, they said, we noticed that you don't last more than 5 years at any position. Is that, should we be concerned about that? And I sat there and I actually thought about it. And I thought about the many different things that I'd been doing. And then even things in the background with, coaching youth sports and such. And I looked at them and I just realized that everything that I've really done in life, and I mentioned this before, has revolved around helping others get better. Even when my wife and I owned the 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchise, it was about hiring young kids and growing them. I wanted them to leave. I wasn't expecting them to spend more than a year with us because I knew it was seasonal, and what we wanted them to leave better than when they got there.
Now, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the 100 Got Junk was your venture?
Oh, no. No, we just owned the franchise in Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
I wish.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the CEO, Brian Scudamore, is still one of the people that I look to today. He's a real inspiration. But yeah, so my wife and I opened the franchise rights in Saskatchewan. But we always tried to grow our employees up and out. When I'm coaching, I want my athletes to be better than when I found them. When I was teaching as a teacher in high school, I want my students to feel like they've learned something and that they got something out of it. That one was tougher. That one was a little more militaristic approach for me. And I finally, when I finally figured it out, I decided to leave teaching. Like I said, 5 years. So I'm sitting there with the interviewers, and I said to them, I said, everything that I've done, I just realized has to do with a coaching or a growing of others and helping them get better. And I said, it sounds like this job is exactly that. It's meeting with business owners, providing them with ideas, advisory, or other and services to help them become more productive, more efficient, more profitable, and just to improve their businesses. And I said, I love that. I said, I owned my own business for 5 years, but due to many different factors, we ended up selling it. But I realized that helping businesses grow was something that I really wanted to do. And at the time when I was hired, I was 39. I realized that I needed to probably settle down into a career at some point, and this job gave me that opportunity. So I've been here for 15 years. I've coached hundreds of businesses, advised hundreds of CEOs, presidents, entrepreneurs, managers to be better and to have more resilience. But it's only really been the last few years that I've started to hone my craft and really decide on the philosophy, and that being the effort over results. But I look back on that, and even prior to that interview, going back to high school, I came back after graduating high school, first year university, and came back to coach the track team because I just love it. You said it the other day, and we'll get into this, that a tree doesn't eat its own fruit. It gives its fruit away, its wisdom, right? What it's learned. And that big, redwood, me, wanted to give to the other students that were only a year or 2 or 3 years younger than me, the knowledge that I had learned in working with a national team coach over that past year and bringing it to my school and teaching these kids. Because I love sharing knowledge, whether it be in football. When I finished CFL, I came back to Saskatchewan and coached football for a few years. And then when I was a high school teacher, I coached. I love giving away what I've learned and the wisdom that I've learned, the fruit that I've grown, and just seeing others benefit from it. It's like I said, it's only really been the last 2 or 3 years that I've become almost emotional about it and deeply connected to it, but it's always been there. And now this is what I want to do, for the rest of my life.
I love that. And
Yeah.
and you can feel your energy and where it is. And I talk about the roots that you grow deep, the roots of vulnerability, humility, or courage. The deeper those roots are, the further that you extend outward, reaching for others and making those connections, cultivating that fruit. And who has been a part of your leadership tree? Who are the people that really shaped you? And now how do you extend your own branches in that wisdom that you want to give away?
Love this question, because I truly love talking about the people that had positive effects in my growth. And I'm in the process of finishing my first draft, my manuscript for my book. And in the book, I speak to it was my grade 8 teacher, 8th grade for you Americans, 8th grade teacher. And I was an okay athlete growing up. Like, I was the chunky big kid. So I was always taller than heavier than the other kids. But for some reason, I had a little bit of athletic genes. My family's, athletic. And here's a story I'll tell. So I had tried out for the senior boys volleyball team in grade 8 at the school I was going to. And this school had just a raft of great athletes. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make this team. So 12 boys were picked to make the team. They try to keep the grade 8s more than the 7s, so there was a little bit of an advantage there. But I know that I knew there was 9 boys for sure, all like hockey players, great athletes. 4 of them went on to play university sports immediately, and one went on to the pros actually. And I actually made the team. And after 2 weeks of practice, Mr. Bitts, who was my 8th grade teacher and the volleyball coach, he actually ended up driving me home one night to after practice, and we were just chit-chatting in the car, and he said to me, he goes, "You know what, Quinn?" He goes, "You were the best mistake I ever made." And I'm 12, and I kind of was like, mistake? Like I just heard mistake. And I was like sort of confused, and so I didn't really respond. I didn't even say thanks, but I kind of just sat there in silence, wondering what best mistake ever made was. And I think he realized that, and he goes, "The other 2 coaches on the team, didn't want to keep you on the team." And I said, "No." I said, he goes, "Quinn really worked really hard. I see some potential in there. I think he's going to be a great addition to the team. Just a good, what we call a locker room guy, right? Someone who brings good energy, isn't the best player in the team, but brings that glue, that cohesion to the team." Because like I said, I was about a 6 out of 10 athlete when all the other boys were 8s and 9s and 10s. And he goes, the mistake I made was the best mistake I made on keeping you on the team, because I've seen the others get better because of your work ethic. I've seen you get better, which is awesome. He goes, "You're just putting the effort in every day." We'll talk about that in a sec. And he said, "You just are good for others to be around." Once again, I'm 12, and I'm just taking it all in as it this being a good thing. And I just heard that, and like the Grinch, my heart grew 10 sizes that day. And I went, he dropped me off at home, and I went inside, and I was just beaming. And I told my mom what coach had said. And that to me is my earliest remembrance of a leader, someone in a leadership position. He was also my grade 8 teacher, but a coach, someone who I really looked up to. And I loved this man even before volleyball happened, but he didn't lead by just, telling us what drills to do and yelling at us and making us run laps and whatever. That was that one moment where he made me feel like he cared. He made me feel like I mattered, and that even though I wasn't the best athlete on the team, I had something to offer. And I fast forward this to workplaces, to educational environments, in the classroom, to even in families, the way we lead our kids and raise our kids. And the things that we say to them have such deep-rooted effects on them. I remember the pastor at our church saying that when you have a child, that's a little tape recorder, and you're pressing record and play from the moment they're born. And he said they just become copy pastes of you. So he said, be aware of what you say around them and so forth. So getting back to the leaders in my life, there was that coach, and then there was a coach that I was assigned to in my junior and senior years of high school. I'm talking American now, grade 11 and 12. And it was a track coach, somewhat, because I was really good at shot put at the time. And so they assigned me to actually a national team coach, and I was on the national development team. And I didn't have a father growing up, and this is something that, maybe this is a different question, but like my father basically left my mother when I was born, literally the week I was born. Never saw him, never met him in my life. So my mom raised the 3 of us on social assistance by herself her entire life. And the reason why I bring that up is because this other great influence on me was my throws coach, my track coach, Bishop Delegowitz, in my junior and senior years of high school, who literally transformed me. Not even just physically from a strength and speed perspective. Obviously, I became a much better thrower. I made the national team, went to Worlds in 1988 and 90. But he made me a man. But it wasn't, militaristic. It wasn't yelling or anything. He made me have confidence in myself. And by just getting me to do the work. He didn't have any expectations. He didn't say you have to lift this much or throw this far. He was just like, just do the workout. He goes, just make sure you get all your reps in. Just make sure you do the work. And yeah. I can't talk about him. um, he ended up moving back to the States, and I didn't see him for a lot of years. And then about, I want to say 15 years later or whatever, or 10 years later, I went down to the States, and I happened to be driving through the town he was coaching in, and I went and saw him. Long story short, he passed away, a year after that. And to me, he was my dad. I only met him at 16. But because I didn't have a father, I think I was always kind of looking for someone to be that father figure to me. And that first coach that I mentioned from grade 8 was very much like that for a few years. But then Bishop was absolutely, I know people say that a lot. It's like they were like a father figure to me, but I think it rings true. I think it's someone that fills that gap in your life that you need that leadership. And he was the one that really brought it. And to be honest, if I don't meet him and I don't go through 3 to 4 years of training with him and build back, I'm not who I am today. Absolutely not. And then there's been others, but man, those two were incredibly impactful in my life.
I just want to acknowledge, like, what a gift to have an influence of men who showed up and knew how to lead with their heart, like knowing that how they make people feel is such an impact. And it isn't just over, and what a beautiful name for your podcast, Effort Over Results. And it isn't just about the wins and the fastest and the greatest. It's the ones that bring so much value, who will pour their heart into something. They may not be the best. And as a coach, I very much value that. I can deeply remember every athlete who just went in with their entire heart. And those were so valuable. And what a gift for you to have that in your upbringing, to teach that so young and such at an impactful age.
It was, I've finally had the time, and I think we need to, get into our 40s and 50s, our really adult years, to be able to look back and see that. I didn't see it then. I mean, obviously I really liked working with him, with this coach, but it didn't dawn on me how much of an impact that would have on me going forward. The confidence he built allowed me to go, away from home and down to school for 4 years in the States. An experience that was good, but also very terrible at times, the experience down there. And I was able to get through it because I was like, I put too much work in to quit. There's so many times I wanted to quit, or I was being told to quit at Washington State University in football. And I was just like, no, I'm not quitting. I mean, and that's become one of our family values, is to finish strong and never quit. But
if I may interject a bit there too, I have a very similar, I can't remember if I talked with you in the last interview, my first varsity year, I quit. And I quit because that environment that I was in was not going to change. And so to that, of that balance of just knowing what environment you can thrive in and what environment you can't, is very real as well. And me quitting led me to make the varsity swim team, which then I earned Rookie of the Year, where my efforts were valued. And such a key thing of where your efforts and where that alignment are then valued.
Yeah. And I don't expect, like, even with my children, our family, one of our family values, and I pass it down to them, is never quit and make it to the end of whatever that length of time is, a season or a year with a group or whatever, and always finish strong. There's some people who, for example, maybe give their 2 weeks notice at work, or they know they're going to quit in a month, and they just start to tail off and they do less work and they really don't. And I'm like, no, you're going to quit in a month. That's fine. But you're going to finish strong right to the bitter end, because it'll benefit you later. And having said all this, Annette, I don't expect anyone, my children or anybody else, to stay in a toxic environment or an abusive environment just to say I didn't quit. I think there's limits. I think there's things that but I do think that there may be, in today's generation and even in today's society, it's too easy to quit. And because we've told an entire generation, and when I say that, I mean mostly the Gen Z generation, but even millennials, that it's okay if you don't like it, you don't deserve to be in that. You need to go and you can move and you can quit and you can go to another job and you can go to, which I think there's some positivity in that, but at the same time, there's no resilience, meaning we're not even trying to make it work. You know, like the divorce rate in the 1990s and 2000s is 50% because people aren't trying to make relationships work. And I think that's something that everybody can take a page out of, you know, your future book, my future book, a lot of books that are already currently out there, is effort and resilience is really what builds confidence, what builds self-esteem, what allows you to get through tough challenges, which grows you. And yeah, at some point you have to just say, okay, this just isn't working. But we don't do enough of that. And that's really what I'm trying to bring to the table here when people are you know, wanting to quit. They don't think they can do. It's like, we don't expect you to you know, shake the world up. It's like, just put in the consistent daily efforts. So, yeah.
And the Enso moment of what I talk about with Enso is aligning that why. And knowing that your growth, as long as you're growing and as long as it's aligning with your goal and where you want to go to, and to your point of, you don't build resiliency by just quitting, starting over with no purpose.
Right.
And let's keep that clear, with no purpose.
Right.
And so if you're starting something new and you've learned a wisdom, you've learned a skill, and then you realize that the alignment, and you've done your efforts to really resilient to find that alignment, and it still isn't working, then okay, yeah. Then does it make more sense to move on and
Absolutely.
find that Enso moment? Yeah, for sure.
And I go back to, you know, 5 years in CFL, 5 years as a business owner, 5 years as a teacher. People could look at me and say, oh, well, look, you quit. Sure. Okay. You can accuse me of that. Or you can, when I write, and I was writing, you know, some of the final chapters of my book last night, and I talk about, no, because the universe doesn't, or God, whatever you believe in, doesn't promise you anything. Like, there's no, like, this is not a journey which ends in a destination. I thought when I played CFL, I was going to play for 15 years. I was going to make enough money to, you know, maybe even retire comfortably, or at least just go into a job and not have to work too hard after that. Didn't happen. So I go into teaching. I thought, okay, this is a good job, making good money. You know, it's you know, pension benefits. I'm going to do this for 30 years. No, another detour. I own a company, which is a complete 180 from being a teacher. 5 years in, you know, or even a couple years in, we're doing really well. We're starting to gain traction. The universe had different ideas, and this is the and even now in the current job that I'm in, I'm like, okay, is my time done here? Because I feel that something is wanting me to change and to become challenged again, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is the universe going, all right, next chapter, here we go. And I've learned to accept that now. I've learned to accept that nothing that we are in is permanent. Friendships, relationships, work, you know, careers, anything that we do, nothing is you can't expect anything to be permanent. That doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean you quit. It just means that there will be moments in your life where you know, God or the universe basically just goes, okay, I think we're done here. I think you've learned what you need to learn. New lesson. All right.
Yeah, here's, that's made it into wisdom, and now on to the next.
Yeah. And I mean, you've never learned enough. And this is what I love about the Enso mindset, because after our interview last week, I read up on it, and I literally want to get that circle tattooed on me, because it just speaks to me. So there's no beginning, there's no end. All we can do is put one foot in front of the other, keep putting effort into ourselves and to others, and just let the Lord decide, you know, what's best for us in that moment.
Yeah, impermanence and imperfection and whatever agnostic view you may have, and
yeah,
it allows. And you know what, your trunk of your tree and those rings tells so many stories and those histories, and every ring represents a season of growth and a challenge and adaptation. and looking at your history and those challenges, and the toughest challenges that have added rings, the toughest ones have the thicker rings. There was a lot to learn. There's a lot of wisdom that you gained. And so what are one of those thick rings that may be of your tree, and how did you push through it?
In speaking in speaking with my counselor, and I've seen someone for roughly 18 months, one of the first things we talked about was my childhood. And I distinctly remember sitting down, and the first thing I said to him was, all right, we're not going to go back to my childhood and bash my parents and say, I was traumatized and just get into the whole typical therapist thing. And he laughs and he goes, no, Quinn, he goes, that's not what we're here to do, because but I definitely want to understand what your childhood was like. And so when you were talking about the rings, I would suggest that the deepest, thickest rings are definitely, from birth to probably 16. There's probably some even variations in the ring and some blood that's been spilled there, because like I said, my mom was in an abusive relationship, the father of my older brother and sister. And I was born 7 years later, different man, who was my biological father. By this time, my siblings' father had left. Like, he was abusive, and then he basically just left my mom. And so she raised my brother and sister for 5 or 6 years, and then she met my dad, who then they had me within the year. I guess the story that I hear is that he panicked. He didn't want to have a kid. He didn't want to have to raise 3 kids, and so he just left. And so I don't look back on my childhood, Annette, as having suffered. I mean, we grew up in poverty. My mom was on social assistance my entire childhood until I left for Washington State University. But I don't look back on it and go, oh, I had a terrible childhood, or I was abused, or it was always a toxic environment in my house. It wasn't. My mom loved us, over loved us. Like my relationship with my mother as a child are some of the fondest memories that I have. But we were definitely surviving, not thriving in that environment. And then when my brother and sister, had left and moved out of the house, it was just my mother and I, and we continued to struggle. This is back in the days, when I think about getting into sports, and I was in sports from a young age. I wore all my brother's hand-me-down hockey equipment, who got his hand-me-down hockey equipment from my uncle, who played for the Chicago Blackhawks, and so it just kept getting passed down. If I did get registered for a sport, you got to remember back then registering for hockey was $50 and, not $700 like it is now. But my mom would have to go to her father or to her brothers to pay for my, registration fees, $3 gas in the car, until the next time we had to put $3 more gas in the car just to get to and from the grocery store to buy $20 worth of groceries. I don't, at my size even, I don't know, and I'm 6'5", 270 now, but I was a large child. I don't know how my mom fed me and my brother and sister on just social assistance checks, but she managed. And I will give her credit for that. She's passed on now. She passed away 7 years ago, but I'll give her credit for figuring a way out to raise 3 kids, 2 who were fully involved in sports, 2 big boys who ate a lot, and fed us and clothed us and kept a roof over our heads, when very well we could have been out in the street.
Yeah.
And it was, I distinctly remember taking Christmas hampers from the church when we were younger. All that shit, all that just it creates who you are. I think both good and bad. And I, till this day, I've said this out loud to my wife. It's like, I will never put my family in a position of poverty. I will never take risks that put my family at risk. I will always be the provider for my family, my wife and my children. And that has been kind of my mantra. But I think this is why I love helping others, is because of all the people that helped us when we were down, when we had no money, when we were struggling, and the people that did come, from the church or from the community and so forth that did help us. And I'm like, and that felt good and bad at the same time, because you don't like to take charity. You want to be proud, have some pride. But now I'm all about willing to give. And I wish more kids, had the opportunity to play sports. It costs a lot to play sports. I'm changing subjects now because I'm getting emotional, but that is where my deepest, darkest rings are, is definitely that 0 to 16. But like I said, and I didn't know any different. I had a very loving mother. My brother and sister were good kids. They didn't get in trouble. Like, we weren't, considering that people would look at us and look at the house we lived in and look at the, the no money we had in the car we drove, and probably go, oh, one kid's probably going to end up in jail. The other kid's probably going to be a drug addict. And it's like, no, my brother ended up being the vice president of a university in the States. My sister has been a teacher for 30 years. And I've go on to do the things that I did. And it's like, because there was love there. And that's all that really mattered. But there definitely is a drive in me, though, to never not have enough money. I'm not out to make millions. I just want to make sure my family's taken care of. And I want my children to understand that, as the Bible passage says, and I use a lot in my podcast, that there's profit in all labor. Everything that you do, whether you liked that labor or not, that effort you put in, the nastiest workout, the nastiest practice you went through in hockey or swimming, and I know swimming practices can get hairy, any of it, you may look back and go, that really sucked. That was terrible. But you'll never look back on it and go, that was bad for me. It's all good. Anything that we do with our hands, with effort, with daily, just contributions to ourselves and to others, is all profit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the heart of your mother that she put in, and that grit and resilience to share that of struggle. I often say I have bonus children. I don't call them stepchildren. I call them my bonus children. And jumping into it in a space where I also don't know what I'm doing, but my mother and my parents taught us that grit and resilience is in the doing. And you do your children a disservice by giving them everything and handing them everything, because they don't learn that resiliency and that grit, which the unfortunate of those who had a not so easy life know that just because they had to be it. And there's a big difference of kids who know it because they lived it, and that's now a very strong root of theirs because they had no other choice. They had the strongest storms when they were a little sapling, so they had no choice but to grow that root so strong. And the balance of a parent to just find it just right, of like, you don't want them to have it so easy because then their roots don't grow strong, but you don't want to go too hard because you don't want to harden them. You want to find that perfect balance where they can still grow their root and still withstand the storms.
And there's no, I mean, I don't want to say there's no right or wrong way to raise a child. There is a wrong way to raise a child, but I think every parent has at least said to their own children at some point, wait till you have kids, because you don't know how I feel until you have children of your own, one. And two, I think it's unfortunately our generation, when I say our generation, my age's generation, the Gen X generation, because we were the feral children of the 80s, kind of raising ourselves, coming home after school, feeding ourselves, because yet now this is the double income family, not in my situation, but for most, it was the double income family. We promised to never let our kids struggle like that, have to raise themselves. And so we became the helicopter parents. And the unfortunate thing with that is we did raise, for the most part, unfortunately, a generation, that being, late millennials and Gen Zs, that don't have a lot of resilience. And you exacerbate that with social media, and you exacerbate that lately with COVID. And it just has been a real struggle for this generations of kids to learn how to steel up and be resilient against negative feedback, against being cut from a team, against getting a bad grade, and then the parents come in to save them. And I'll put my hand up. I did it too for my kids. I went and talked to teachers and coaches when things went poorly, and I wasn't berating the coaches or teachers, but I was trying to figure out what went wrong, and but I was trying to pave this gold path for my children that I now regret, because I feel like I did too much for them. And they'll tell you the same thing. Yeah, Dad, like, you did a lot for us, and while we thank you, probably would have been better to let us figure it out on our own. But I think this goes back to my childhood and what I grew up in, is that I've always taken it upon myself to protect others, especially ones that are closest to me. And so I protected my mom for 3-4 decades. And then once I had my own family, I was going to protect my family from failure. I didn't want to see my kids fail or be sad or cry. I still struggle with people who cry, and yet I'm crying today. I wanted to make sure that my kids worked hard, and they did. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't easy on them. I made them work hard, but I also wanted to protect them from abject failure or feeling like they had failed, because I feel like I didn't do a whole lot in my childhood growing up, because I wasn't given those opportunities. But I think we need to do more of that now. And I'm really hoping that my children raise their kids a little differently, and that they try to teach them about resilience, about effort over results. Let's not be a results-driven society. But how do you get away from that? Every day on social media, when you doom scroll, it's all about results, whether they be good or bad. It's always the end goal, the end goal, the end goal, the destination. What's at the end of this for me? And we need to just find a way to be content in the here and now, and let tomorrow be tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And this day in sports, my brother-in-law, he played lacrosse for University of Michigan, and him and my sister started a lacrosse program in our small town, and he's doing it like no other, because he wants to keep it affordable, and he wants to ensure that those values are taught, and the grassroots of understanding the value of sports, of not just to win. It's what you grow. And so beautiful. And comes to mind as well, a book I'm reading right now is called Changeable, and Dr. Stuart Ablon, I watched a podcast with him and Mel Robbins, and he says children will, if they can,
Right.
And if they can, and meaning that oftentimes we don't realize that they don't have this skill. That's why they can't. And paired with Mel Robbins' let them theory, but there's a real balance of making sure that they know the skill.
It's not a matter of will, it's a matter of skill. That's it.
Yeah.
Right?
And being just cognizant of that, to ensure that we teach whoever it is around us, whether it's our team, whether it's our children, whether it's our friends, of the tree still growing, and those roots of a skill that will give us resiliency. And those skills being so important of self-awareness, perspective, humility, and vulnerability are so huge. And I want to thank you for showing so much of that in a space where people may feel it's too hard, so don't talk about it in front of it, but that's when you actually learn from it. Yeah.
And that resiliency comes from the basis of my philosophy and my coaching philosophy is the growth mindset. The book that I read from Dr. Carol Dweck, and it basically it just preaches effort over results. It basically just says your employees, your students, anybody you're raising, you're leading, you're trying to grow, continue to praise them for the work they put in, continue to praise them for the effort they put in, because that is what's going to allow them to become resilient. Because even if they put a lot of work in, and let's say they failed, they didn't finish the project, they didn't win the game, they didn't have that ultimate goal that they wanted, they weren't fixated on that. Because and I speak to this in my own children, and maybe we can get to that in a second, but it's like when you preach great result, They don't see the A to Y of the A to Z. They just see Z. And I didn't get Z, so I failed. And then they quit. Or if they feel like they're going to fail, they quit early. And there's no resilience there. And so it goes back to that growth mindset. And the philosophy of what I'm preaching now is that the growth mindset basically says is that you can grow and learn and be better at anything you truly want to be. It might take you longer than others. Maybe you don't have the resources, but anybody can do and be what they want to do and be. But there's an amount of work that comes with it. But just focus on the work that you're putting in. Be happy you finished that workout that day. Be happy you finished writing a few pages of your new book that day. Don't be thinking about what the end product is all the time, because a results-oriented society sets everyone up for failure. And that's where resilience comes from. It comes from building a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. And that's what I continue to keep putting out there in terms of the social media posts that I do or the coaching that I do. It's just put the work in. Stop thinking about the end goal. You know what the output is that you want. Set it and forget it. Decide, but make it more general and just focus on what today's work needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And just then another day. And Alex Ramosi, who I have a lot of respect for, he's a businessman in the United States. He goes, just stack layers. He goes, if you were to paint, take a paintbrush with paint and put a line on the canvas and looked at it from the side, you wouldn't see the layer of paint. He goes, put another layer there. You're still not going to see it. He goes, now put 500 layers of paint after they dry and dry and dry. And he goes, you start to see it. So that became sort of my mantra. And what I told my kids, I said, did you stack some layers today? Yeah, stacking layers. That's all it is, Dad, stacking layers. And I'm like, I love that, because all they want to see is that little pile get a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger. They're not looking at where they need to be. It's just, I got to do this first. So
yeah, compound effect, right? Of
compound interest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we already talked about this, but you mentioned it earlier. From what I say, of a tree doesn't need its own fruit. It grows, it gives, it leaves behind for the next generation. And so, Quinn, that legacy, your legacy, if you could leave behind one key lesson, a fruit of wisdom for our listeners today, what would it be?
There's so many things that I've come to learn in the last 3 years. And I'm 53. It's taken me 50 years. I mean, I shouldn't say it's taken me 50 years, because you learn along the way, obviously. And your worldview changes, and your mindset changes, obviously, nonstop. And it should. You should always have your beliefs and everything challenged so you can see the world differently. But I think, and it's going to sound a bit cliche and almost like a platitude, but I think people really just need to stop having such high expectations. And I know that there's some of my alpha male friends out there that are going to say, no, high expectations are great. We should always shoot for the stars. I used to believe that, but the problem with that is that it sets you up for failure when you shoot too far out instead of just getting done what needs to get done today. And so, getting back to what I was saying about it, I mean, this isn't even self-promotional, but it really truly is just about effort over the results. It's about just putting in daily work and not having any expectation from it other than that you put in good work. And at the end of the day, you can look back and go, that was a good day. I got some things done. I moved the needle. I took a few swings and, we made contact a couple times, but I didn't have an expectation at the end of the day that I had to be anywhere or I had to have completed anything or a destination has been met. And I think our generation grew up with parents, and our parents, like my mom was born in the 40s and my grandparents in the early 1900s, that it was about the destination. It was about results. And then it was about going to university and getting a degree and this timeline. And what I'm learning from the younger generation, my children, Gen Zs and millennials, is that they are being bombarded nonstop with results this, results that. Look at your friends and the great trips they're on. Look at the money they have. Look at the TikTok influencers and the YouTubers and all this. And I want this generation to just slow down and truly find what they love and enjoy it in the moment and not have any expectation of, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Because sorry, boomers, that's gone. Nobody's going to spend 40 years in a job anymore. It's not going to happen. And we need to adjust to that. But it all goes back to put the work in day to day of things that you like to do, things you like to contribute to your family, your relationships, to the world, and then let the universe sort it out. It's okay to have goals. I'm not poo-pooing goals. I think goals are important, but I think you need to just have an idea of where you want to end up, but then kind of just let that set it and forget it, and just day one. I think there was, I heard, well, I'm sure this is, everybody knows, it's not one day, it's day one, right? One day, no, day one.
Make the day count instead of count the days.
Yep. And and you're going to have days where you do nothing. That's okay. If you string together 30 days of nothing, then there's some intervention that probably needs to happen. But I have told my kids now, when they eventually have children, neither one of them have kids yet, I said, please don't praise them for that A+. Don't praise them for winning the race. Don't praise them for, that end goal result destination thing that happened. Keep telling them how proud you are of how hard they worked to get it. The effort they put in to grind it out so your teammate could score the goal. Talk about the effort part of things. You can celebrate the goals and the results and the wins and the championship. Sure, don't get me wrong. Let's celebrate those. But really, let's praise the work that went into it first, because then you build resilient children, a resilient generation, because to them, there is no failure. The only failure is to not try or not do anything. So if they have a choice of, okay, I get praised for putting in work and effort, that felt pretty good, or I'm not getting praised because I've done nothing, that doesn't feel very good, they're going to choose this. But if you constantly send the message of, the result is the only thing that matters, and this goes for employers too. If you're only praising them for finishing the project, or the company's made a bunch more money because of you and whatever, they're going to set that bar there, and they're going to go, next, I'm afraid to take that next challenge on that next project, because if I don't, it's a failure. Employers, praise on a regular basis, recognize for effort put in. And this goes across, and the book, and I actually have it here. I actually printed it out. I'm so proud of this. But it speaks to, this isn't just business. This is sports, this is families, it's relationships, it's husband and wife, it's partnerships, it's education, it's everything. Your ENSO mindset applies to everything. I want to steal your ideas because they're so awesome. And I know they're not your ideas necessarily. I mean, you're obviously bringing forth a philosophy, but I love what it talks about. Like the tree metaphor is so beautiful, and I love that. And I envision myself that my roots are deep, and the rings are dark, and I want to now take everything that I've learned. And I've been through a lot, and a lot of people don't know that. This is the first time I'm really starting to expose this, that it's like, let me share with you to help you get better. This isn't about me. This isn't about look at me. This is just, I want people to hopefully listen and learn from it. So that one thing, it's just what I'm preaching right now. It's just, don't sit there. Don't just sit and do nothing. Don't let others do things for you. Don't let machines do everything for you. But it's tough to do that. But there's profit in all labor. So no matter what you do on a day-to-day basis, if it forced you to move, it forced you to use your brain, forced you to use your body in whatever form, that's a positive step forward.
And that effort over results is so evident and so clear. And this has been an amazing conversation. And thank you so much, Quinn, for sharing with me and taking this time to trust me with your story. which is so impactful, and so many can learn so much from it. We started with such excitement, and this has so much energy in it, but we're closing with that wisdom. And because true leadership isn't just about running fast, and as you say, it's about growing and standing strong amongst whatever weather that's going to come across. And your roots and your branches, thank you for sharing all of that with us today. And I want to encourage all the listeners to go check out Quinn's page and his podcast, and the one with you and I guess.
That's coming out next week.
Next week, yes. Yep. And if you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe, share. Most importantly, go out and grow something meaningful today, because no matter the storm, a tree still grows. Thank you for listening, and take care.